Jake Elliott hit a 45-yard field goal, which means they had the day off of practice tomorrow, PT, but now no meetings, nothing.
Oh, okay. Totally off. Completely off.
That's right.
Good for him.
They were able to get that. Doug Peterson said today, he was asked, what did you promise them if Jake Elliott made the field goal? He said, that's just between me and the guys. Popsicles. It's got to be more than that. And he says, yeah, it was a little bit more than that. And apparently, John, that means the team, which was scheduled to be off tomorrow in terms of practicing, they might get the entire day off tomorrow because Jake Elliott is clutch. And apparently he's been very good in camp so far.
Yeah, he has. He's been perfect. I haven't seen him miss a kick, and I think he made 6 today, including that final. It was about a 45-yarder, gauging. Sometimes it's tough to be perfect on those things, but, there was a lot of pressure on him because obviously the whole team is giving off the meetings tonight if he makes it, and he just knocked it in the right upright, so the team erupted. Doug that's been a theme I've talked about without camp. He tends to end it on a high note, and Jake Elliott helped him out today.
Right. And it's always fun when, sometimes getting the kicker to get pressure on him, to make a pressure kick in the preseason or in training camp is kind of tough to do. That's a good way to say, hey, look, I'm going to put a little pressure on you here. The whole team's watching you. You got to make this kick to give everybody off.
Yeah, that's what I wrote on 73ESPN.com. If you think about it, I mean, obviously big kicks, the 61-yard against the Giants, big kicks in the Super Bowl. But if you're going to create an environment in the preseason, it's impossible because the players are aware these games don't matter. But if he misses that kick in practice, the whole team's going to get on him. That's a lot of pressure. So it is an interesting way to do things.
Yeah, pressure situations, as John wrote about at 973ESPN.com, that's what it's all about. He hit a 61-yarder against the Giants. He has made kicks in the Super Bowl, and now he's making kicks to get them off of practice a little bit. But I guess the big news today continues to be Carson Wentz, who seems like he's getting scaled back more and more.
Yeah, and I think it all harkens back, and Doug finally admitted today, we talked about it, I mentioned it on Saturday last week, is the last time he was in team drills. And there was one play where sort of the scrum got almost backed up into him, and there were a lot of bodies around his legs. And I think the Eagles got a little freaked out by that. When we asked Doug that day, he said, no, it had nothing to do with it. But the NFL Network showed up today, and he admitted, yeah, that probably had a lot to do with it. So I'm going to yell at Doug because he's given the NFL Network more information than he's given us. But the bottom line is he's not clear for contact. That's the last hurdle. And the Eagles got a little spooked because he was real close to contact. And if you think about it, in team drills, you can make them as controlled as you want. But if one big body falls the wrong way, there's not much you can do about it. Yeah. So I think that's why he's been scaled back to the degree he has. Now, today was a 10-10-10 practice, and Zach Ertz was given the day off, for instance. Elodie Nada was given the day off yesterday. Carson didn't do much today other than individual drills, probably the least amount he's done in practice to this point. But I think it was just about giving him a day off.
Yeah. And, is there any amount of practice time? Because I talked about this the other day, John. We were talking about his rookie year. He broke his rib and missed a lot of time. And then 8 days beforehand, hey, you're the starter. So this guy has some background of not performing all that much in camp and being able to perform when the lights go on.
Yeah. And back when he was participating in team drills, I asked him specifically, does he need to play in a preseason game from his standpoint to get ready? And he flat out said no. He doesn't need it. And I think a lot of veteran players don't need it, and certainly they're not going to risk it. There's no reason to. So I think people forget the calendar. It's August 3rd. He is less than 8 months on the surgery. The 8-month mark will be August 13th. There's still over a month to go before the season opener. And if he hadn't started out working in team drills, nobody would have batted an eye. I think the only reason people are concerned is because he started out and he was so far ahead of schedule, and now they're saying, what's going on? Nothing's going on other than the Eagles were spooked that he almost got rolled up on in team drills, and they backed him off.
John McMullen with us. John, if the cleared for contact is then the last hurdle that Carson Wentz has to, for lack of a better word, clear, do you anticipate that that's something that they would – is that the week before the opener that they actually let him practice there, or do you envision a scenario where he doesn't practice with contact at all until they actually go out for that game against the Falcons?
Yeah, I mean, I don't expect him to be in any live periods, certainly through training camp. Training camp, remember, is over August 14th. They've already had 2 days where they've gone live at times. Maybe there'll be another day. I don't expect him to be in any of that. So then you have August 14th moving forward through the week of practice for September 6th. At some point in that time frame, you do expect him to be cleared for contact. However, just the way the NFL is, there's not a lot of live periods. So, yeah, I mean, it's very conceivable that he goes into week one against Atlanta as the starting quarterback, and he hasn't been hit since December 10th of last year. That's very conceivable.
I mean, John, I guess the key word that I keep hearing when we talk about Carson Wentz from both Doug and Carson is the word. I mean, if you and I got paid on the times they say plan or the plan, we'd both be very wealthy, right? I mean, but nobody tells us what the plan is. Isn't that the frustration between the media and both of those guys
plan,
right now?
Could be the process.
I mean, the plan is, thank God they don't call it the process. The plan is basically, it's pretty simple when it's boiled down. Doug at times, I think, makes a mistake by making it more complicated. And the plan comes down to when the doctors clear Carson Wentz for contact. I mean, that's when that happens, he's the starting quarterback. If that doesn't happen before September 6th, the week when you're practicing, he's not going to start. If it does, he is going to start. It's pretty simple, but, you know, you have the minutia of training camp, and it's day to day, and people need things to write about, and they need things to talk about, and he's the starting quarterback on the Super Bowl champions, and he's one of the best players in this league, so the day-to-day sort of soap opera-nish of it is always going to be a story.
You know, John, one thing I didn't think about until I saw it either in social media or that they overhauled their medical staff, the Eagles did. Peter DeLuca, Gary Dorsheimer no longer there, and now they've got Christopher Rothman in as their new guy. I mean, does that also have something to do with the fact that there is a plan, we're just not going to know about it?
Well, no, I mean, it doesn't matter who's in charge as far as the medical team. We were never going to hear about it. They were never going to come out and give you benchmarks for the simple reason that if he doesn't reach one, they don't want it to be spun and made into this big thing and saying he's behind schedule instead of ahead of schedule. So there's a public relations aspect to it. But, hey, the previous doctors, they never spoke. I don't think an Eagles trainer has talked with us since Rick Burkhalter left with Andy Reid. Yep. They don't talk to us. So this is not new. They're not going to Tim Jernigan was out of his locker today, and he obviously underwent back surgery, and we asked him how he's doing, what's the timetable. And he said, ask the coach, ask the trainer. Well, we can't ask the trainer. Right. We can ask the coach, but he's not going to give us any information.
Upper body.
Occasionally you have guys. Yeah, I mean, guys will tell us certain things. I mean, Bryce Treggs was on the NFI list. He told me right away what was wrong with him. So it's up to the individual player at this time of year because the team is not does not have to give injury updates until week one, the week before week one, and they take advantage of that. And that's why you hear all the hockey stuff and the upper body and lower body and things like that.
Just real quick before we leave injury disclosing and how they disclose and what they do and don't disclose, would you find it to be, like you mentioned Rick Burkholder and Andy Reid, is it more secretive now? Is it less? I mean, how has it evolved, I guess, from the Andy Reid days when I think he really brought Rick Burkholder on, too, because he was getting hammered with all these medical questions, and he'd be like, look, let me just throw Rick up there. Maybe that will take some of the pressure off of me.
One thing I'd like to interject, though, would be with the gambling now more widespread, are they going to have to be more transparent with the injuries?
Well, I mean, they've always been transparent when the season starts and the injury reports, and nothing's changed there. And it's always been that way, that you don't have to give injury updates in the off season. So that part hasn't changed. Maybe they should be more proactive because of the gambling aspect. But to be honest, they're trying to ignore that as best as possible. So I don't think they're going to change any policies just because of that. And yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of ways it's easier for the head coach if they do allow the trainer to speak, because they aren't doctors and they aren't trainers and they aren't professionals, and injury decisions are out of their hands. It's not up to Doug Peterson when Carson Wentz is cleared. It's not up to Doug Peterson to say he's going to be the starter week one. He's not going to be the starter week one. That's a doctor decision. And Doug has been very, very clear that when he is cleared, he is the starting quarterback. So whether that's week one, week three, week 8, next year, he said that, but it's not his decision to clear Carson Wentz. And it's certainly, and I think we got into that a little bit yesterday, I think people think Carson is driving this. It's not Carson's decision either. He wants to be on the field. He has to listen to the doctors and the medical team.
John McMullen with us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Eagles training camp, day 8 now in the books. And, John, if we were down here in AC doing marketing, we'd be like, it's all about the slot, right? Well, Sidney Jones back in that slot position on the defense, and it's the rotating slot guy. Today it was Sidney Jones. What did you see there?
Yeah, it's different every single day. It has been a camp. It's generally rotated between Sidney Jones and Devontae Ballsby day to day. Yesterday was Jalen Mills, which was an interesting twist, but I did get from Jalen that he does not want to play the slot, so you have to throw that into the equation as well. So nobody wants to play in the slot. All the Eagles cornerbacks, and that's why it's such an interesting dynamic, because this is the most talented group they've had at corner in years and years and years. Certainly the deepest, but they're all outside cornerbacks, and they all have no really experience of playing inside. And it's going to be interesting. And, one thing I haven't brought up since the days of Chip Kelly, the break glass in case of emergency guy has always been Malcolm Jenkins. And you might show up September 6th in Atlanta saying, who are they going to put in the slot? You know what? If nobody is comfortable with it, if nobody's good at it, it might be Malcolm Jenkins.
Yeah. You got a lot of guys. You got Douglas. You got, obviously, Mills and Darby, who started last year. You're adding Jones to the mix. They drafted Maddox. They like Ballsby there. That's 6 guys. How many guys do they keep at that spot?
Well, they're certainly going to keep 5. I think they're going to keep 6. I think Ballsby's going to make the team at least early here. You remember, the league has changed. You need so many bodies at that position because teams each and every week are going to throw receivers at you, and there are going to be a ton of them on the field, and even the tight ends today are glorified receivers. I mean, think about week 1 in the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, what they're able to throw at you now, it's Julio Jones, we know. It's Mohamed Sanu, we know. Their first-round pick is Calvin Ridley. Those are the 3 receivers that are going to be thrown at you. week one against the Atlanta Falcons with a former MVP playing quarterback. So you need a ton of bodies in the defensive backfield. And the Eagles are better at cornerback than they are at safety. So they're going to be scratching to find that third and fourth safety. But they got a lot of cornerbacks, and I think they're going to keep them all.
Yeah, I was going to say, any of those corners candidates to be that third safety?
No, they haven't. We've all kind of pictured Rasul Douglas as a safety because of his size and his physicality. But the Eagles have not gone down that route at all. He's not even getting a rep at safety. That might be something for down the line, 2019, 2020, if things develop, but not this year. It's been Trey Sullivan. Remember, Chris Marigot still is not practicing. And then behind Trey Sullivan, who's just, he was an undrafted free agent last year, spent some time on the practice squad. Then you have undrafted guys, Jeremy Reeves and Steven Roberts. So not a lot of depth at that safety position behind Malcolm and Rodney McLeod. And that also goes back to the nickel position, because if you do want Malcolm playing it, and he can, and he can play it at the high level, you got to have somebody playing safety.
Yeah, that's for
and
sure.
Are you comfortable with Trey Sullivan?
It's been a few years since Darren Sproles was returning kicks, but is that something we could see from him this year for getting more ways to get him out there?
Yeah, I'm going to take credit for that one too. Because I asked Dave Phipp in the spring, and I asked Doug Peterson, with these new rule changes, are you going to change? Are you going to have Darren Sproles return kicks? Because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to duplicate it, take out the high-speed collisions. It's more of a punt dynamic on the kickoff returns. So it makes sense to have Darren Sproles back there. And today, lo and behold, he's the first-team kick returner, returning kicks. And it's a smart move. There's very few people who've returned punts in this league better than Darren Sproles. And if you're going to create that dynamic on the kick returns, he's going to be better than Corey Clement or Wendell Smallwood or anybody else you can throw back there as a kick returner.
Well, John, since we talked about Jake Elliott, I know special teams was a big focus of today's practice too. And on kickoff coverage, you went right through and named every guy where they lined up. That's in your article on 97.3 ESPN.com. But they also were practicing some special plays too, right? Onside kicks?
Yeah, they did about 3 onside kicks, and the first one worked, and it was pretty much Jake Elliott kicking the ball to himself right up the middle, and he recovered the first one. Then the coverage units kind of got it, and they tried it 2 more times, and Camus, Grugier, Hill got one, Rodney McLeod got one, so maybe you can get somebody with that on a surprise. Obviously, it's very difficult to get an onside kick in any equation, but 1 out of 3 is certainly the Eagles would take that percentage anytime. But they want to be ahead, so they don't want to be needing onside kicks late in games.
Hey, John, you mentioned Camus, and from what I understand, he's bulked up a lot, and he thinks that, or they think that maybe he could help out in more than just special teams.
Yeah, he's in the equation. That's another position, the Michael Kendricks position on the weak side and the third linebacker. It's really been everybody. We haven't talked about it as much as the slot, but Camus gotten opportunities. Nate Gary's gotten opportunities. Corey Nelson's gotten opportunities. So they're rolling bodies there as well to see who will be the starter in the base defense at that position. And be the third linebacker in. And he's up. Yeah, he said he played at 215 last year, which is incredibly small for a linebacker. And remember, in college, he was more of a rover. Wasn't a safety. People say he was a safety, but he's more of a rover. And now he's up to 230. So he's gained a lot of weight. Nate Gary's in the same position. He played safety at Nebraska. He came here at about 212. He's up to 230. So linebackers are not as big as they used to be, but you can't play that position at 212 or 215. So both of those guys are bulked up.
John, finally, there's a question that you asked today of Doug Peterson, which was from the game last night, how they called that helmet rule. The ratings for the game last night were pretty good, 4.7 on the overnight there for a preseason game, the Hall of Fame game. But what did Doug Peterson have to say about how they called that last night? You know, people already were talking about some of the hits that had flags thrown.
Oh, it was awful. Did you guys see it? It was awful. If they're going to call that game, and I talked to a bunch of players in the locker room. I talked to Camus. I talked to Nigel Bradham. I talked to Malcolm Jenkins. Nigel didn't see, man. Nigel's been very vocal in the past when he saw the video that the officials showed the Eagles to sort of educate them. He was very unhappy. Malcolm's been very outspoken, very unhappy. Camus he saw the plays. And, you know, a lot of them were just form tackle, to be honest. If they're going to call this game like they called that preseason game, we might be able to put, what's today, August 3rd? We might be able to put August 2nd, 2018 as the death of professional football. That was awful. And you hope, and that's all you can do, is hope they're just going to emphasize it in the preseason and go back to the normal way of calling this game in the regular season. But if they're going to call that game like that,
yeah,
it's going to be unwatchable.
Well, it's something
really is.
It's something that we've been concerned about, and the fact that, you know, this happens all the time, John, when there's new rules, that the officials now have to get used to calling this new rule because they're not used to calling it.
Yeah. And it puts more pressure on them, and everybody's going to get angry at them, and it's not their fault because they're just doing what they're told to do. And as you mentioned, I asked Doug the question. Doug, I mean, he's in a position where he's management, and he's got to toe the NFL's line. And he said they were all illegal hits, and by definition, by the way, they are now. But that's just. I mean, at some point, I've been saying it for years, at some point these two sides have to come together, the players and the league, and stipulate this is a dangerous game. And you can play it if you want, but there's potential long-term health effects to playing it. And you let adults make decisions. If they want to play, they can play. If they don't want to play, don't play. But wow, this rule is not going to work.
We'll have to keep an eye on that, obviously, as the preseason continues and as the season goes on. That will be a huge change if they call the game, as John said, like they did last night. John McMullen, like all guests, appear via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Follow him on Twitter at JFMcMullen. And don't forget, check out his national coverage, GetMoreSports.com, as the NFL is officially back. 25 straight weeks. We're going to have football now. Although last night that wasn't really football.
Yeah, we didn't have it last night, so hopefully we can have it for 24 weeks.
Well, we're less than a week away from Eagles opener against the Pittsburgh Steelers. John, thanks, man.
Hey, thank you, guys.